What's up, everybody? Welcome to the show. I'm going to be here today with Kevin Kane, who is and I don't want to misrepresent Kevin. He's not here yet. He's a quantum cryptologist. I know he works in the industry and works in I don't know if you say in the defense sector, but really, I mean, anything involving quantum cryptology is defense oriented or offensive oriented. Oh, we got a super chat here to kick it off. What's up, Philip from Philip Fisher? You made me pick between Michael Malice, Premiere, and my favorite subject. Well, I picked encryption. Yeah, that's a good point. Right before I went live, I looked on YouTube and I saw that Michael Malice is premiering his episode of You're Welcome with myself and Jacob Chansley, the American Shaman. What a show. I mean, how could I compete with myself? This is a weird world we live in, man, with these virtual copies of yourself talking to yourself. It is a good opportunity to learn about yourself. That's for sure. That's probably one of the main things so basically, when we get into this conversation about quantum cryptology, and a lot of what I've been thinking about regarding is like disclosure in general, what is ethical to disclose? Because like I went through a phase of my life, and I'll probably repeat a lot of this stuff with Kevin because I know he's into the ethics in the of this conversation too, of technology in general. Like I used to think if the knowledge is available, release it, give it to the public. What is all this holding information, keeping things secret? And then I slowly started to grow up. I slowly started to gain like maybe a different perspective on reality and thought like, okay, it's not all like peaceful rainbows and unicorns and just eating grass and getting along. It's like kill or be killed in a lot of ways, or like who's in control, who owns the police force, who's running the show. And if someone else, like if the United States were to develop here's Kevin now. So I'm going to continue this conversation with Kevin. Hey, man.
How you doing? Sorry for the delay.
No worries. I was just talking about the ethics of disclosure. And before we get too much into it, I wanted to let people know who you are. Kevin, obviously, you said the CEO of American Binary. What's American Binary?
American Binary is network security and cryptography, high performance networking and cryptography company.
And okay, awesome. Is that company you started?
Yes, I started in 2019. We started out building out authentically decentralized systems for computer science nerds. That means we worked to achieve NAT traversal without any nodes to connect users.
Okay. A lot of these terms and things I think are going to be over my head, but I'm open. I'm fine with it.
So during the crypto boom, there was a lot of claims of decentralization, but none of it was decentralized by a computer scientist's definition, meaning that they had something out on the internet to identify the people that had to communicate and linking them. And that makes it no longer decentralized, even if the chats are just on your phone, because that's an area where there can be like what they call a middle in the man attack. Somebody can see now there is a place where you're meeting in the middle, and that's the point of interception of your communication. So whether they were decentralized exchanges or whatever word salads people could come up with, they were sort of like gimmicky. They weren't decentralized as a computer scientist would imagine it. And there's a reason for that. It's no knock on them. The true decentralization is extremely difficult. It's what they would call like a DARPA hard problem, or Vint Cerf, who invented TCP/IP, kind of like level of difficulty, not for just somebody who learned how to code with Alpha Udemy.
If like, is Verizon kind of like a node?
No, Verizon's a network operator, and so they operate the network that you get to use. You can decentralize in this context means like you have two mobile phones, and my mobile phone can by chat only identify the location of your mobile phone and send a message to it. So the internet is not, it's not, if you're using internet IP addresses to find people, it's much more difficult. Let's say, for example, mobile, because they change.
So, oh yeah.
So what happens is like you would use a server, and it would identify the location of that user, their IP address that's changing, and identify the others and then connect them. That's a node, or that's a server. That's that's a location. That's a location that, but see, then like the bad guys hang out there. Right. So that's why it's not really decentralized. And we started out doing research in that space. We actually achieved NAT traversal. So we had communicated computer to computer without anything at all on the internet except my computer and his computer. And we did that using a decentralized chat. We also experimented with it mobile. It's a long technical conversation that's sort of out of my depth, actually, when you go look at my resume. The only reason I can speak at a 100,000-foot level, and probably incorrectly so, is because I have really great co-founder and team. Now, and I think that is a very important distinction because, like, when I do these podcasts, there's like 3 or 4 different types of audience, right? I love the decentralized conversation. This sort of usually people who like to have that are people who've been coding since like the 90s and they sort of know how the internet took off, public internet.
I've been really into working with Minds. I co-founded Minds with Bill Ottman and John Ottman, Mark Harding, and we were talking about decentralized, like creating some sort of mesh network and just phone to phone without these centralized nodes. And then things like Briar started appearing. I don't know if you're ever familiar with Briar. It's like a text phone to phone mesh text thing. You don't need a network for it. You can be on a boat and 2 guys can text.
I
And
mean, the closest thing I think we had to actual decentralized chat was Skype. That was before Microsoft bought it in the early days of Skype. Those guys did some really interesting work before it became sort of, for mass user.
Is texting decentralized, like my phone to your phone?
That's a really interesting question. No, it's going to have some sort of centralized way to identify the locations of the people, but that's out of my depth, honestly. That's a
So
really good question. I mean, well, first of all, let's back up on that. So let's say you're talking from Apple to Android, then your texts are unencrypted, right? So you don't want to be using something that's unencrypted. And it's not that you're doing something bad. It's that I always tell people like, well, I don't have anything to hide. Well, give me your wallet real quick. Let me borrow that, and I'm gonna go to the coffee store and come back. Oh, well, I thought you said you had nothing to hide. So you want to be careful even if you're a grandma, surfing Amazon for things that you want for your children for Christmas or whatever. You want to make sure you are using encrypted stuff.
yeah, you were saying that the future of quantum encryption hacking and all that is like encryption in general is going to be undone. I don't know if you were, I don't want to put words in your mouth if you were saying that all of it will be, but that like what we think is encrypted now can be reverse engineered in the future. And
Yeah, so this is to some audiences a big claim. To others, this is we knew this 10 years ago kind of thing. And so there are about, I don't know, 5 to 15 companies in the world, probably 7 that I just know of, that specialize in this transition to new encryption. And we're one of them. So about 10 years ago or so, some of the greatest minds in cryptography, including DJ Bernstein, who is infamous for some popular elliptic curve cryptography that a lot of also crypto people know, they had come to a consensus that quantum computers would break most of the encryption we have, including RSA, which is sort of a backbone. And so a lot of people tried to argue and spend a lot of time about why they can and can't. And for some people, they can pinpoint exactly how, and they know what they're talking about. And then there is the art of the possible, which is beyond what a person knows what they're talking about, right? So it became a really heated discussion. So I want to segment that off. This is a conversation about whether quantum computers can or can't break encryption. That is one left to only like 2 or 3 classes of people in the world who could actually, I would actually listen to what they have to say. Those are people who really know mathematics and cryptology, and they also know the state of the art in quantum algorithms, search space reduction algorithms, factoring algorithms, and then also all of the many different designs of quantum computers, of the many different designs of classical computers. When a person has an extremely good command of that and is current to it in 2023 and reads papers every week, then they can speak to confidently whether or not all the world's recorded encryption can be broken anytime soon. And one of those groups that has that kind of competence is obviously the NSA, with like 60,000 employees or something like that. And the NSA updated CNSA 2.0, which is basically the commercial solutions guidelines for encryption. And from next year, they banned RSA and they banned every elliptic curve cryptography. Now that's really important because some people will say, and almost I'm going to make a jab here in a low sophisticated analytical conclusion. Oh, they want you to use the things that are secure. They don't want you using things that are secure. What? No, my man, that's for federal networks, for satellite systems, for the president's stuff. They're not allowing them to use elliptic curve cryptography or RSA. And they have to begin transitioning from 2025, which is 12 months away.
That indicates that they're concerned it's going to be hacked, I guess.
Yes,
cracked.
there is the concern is public. So the White House put out 3 memos addressing timelines to and guidance on transitioning for all federal systems. So by 2033, you're not even allowed to use legacy stuff without the new encryption standard.
Does that indicate, like, for common people that all their emails are going to be just hacked and dumped on the internet?
They're not. So, I mean, it depends, right? So competent companies, relatively competent anyway, like Google, are fast on the trail and releasing post-quantum ciphers in the browser for testing and stuff like that. They spun out a company in post-quantum cryptography through Google X that became, or some of the people left Google. They have a lot of efforts under this way. So do other groups around the world. And in the United Kingdom has PQ Shield. I think they had some funding from the government. Those guys are pretty competent. I haven't really seen anything emerge out of Asia just yet, but they are also probably local to language. I lived in Korea 10 years. And it's not rocket science. It's about implementing the stuff that has been done. Let me explain that. So 10 years ago, National Institute of Standard Technology, NIST, United States, raised their hand and took a lead for the world and said, we have to develop new cryptography, and we don't know what that's going to look like. And we need it to survive quantum computers. So cryptographers from China, from Europe, from all around the world joined the competition, or the challenge, they call it. And in the challenge, they developed three digital signatures and 1 general purpose encryption that are approved last year for standardization. So they achieved the heroic feat. And one of them is called Kyber. I think they're going to change the name to KEM something else. I forget what ML-KEM. There's a lot of technical stuff going on here. It's largely that's a lattice algebra based cryptography. And there are new continuous efforts underway. The goal is to increase the complexity of the encryption so that a search space reduction algorithm isn't as helpful as it otherwise would be for a simpler construction. And same thing for factoring. So if the algorithm just counts on you not being able to compute at compute at not more than polynomial time, maybe we want to change something else. So the smartest people in the world are working on this, and they have come up with 4 solutions that the U.S. government has said and the NSA said this is good to go.
I've heard of this thing called time crystals. It's a new technology where it's actually a crystal lattice that's in motion. So the shape of it is the motion of it. And I wonder if cryptology can function similarly in that you don't have like a strand of numbers and letters and shapes. You actually have a constant changing set of data. And as soon as you locate one of them, all the other ones change. So you can never lock them all down.
Okay, so if you're alluding to using quantum computing or quantum properties to build encryption, there are a couple of areas we can break this down to. So there is a such thing as quantum encryption, and then there is a such thing as quantum key distribution. They are actually different. And then there is post-quantum cryptography, which is what we do. So what we do in post-quantum cryptography is software. It's like a lattice algebra-based cryptography that we did not develop, that we perfect the software implementation of and get it to be interoperable with austere environments, complicated deployments. Like, for example, on a chip or on a Raspberry Pi, for example, or on that kind of stuff. So we're personally, as a company, working towards being able to play in the backbone of the internet and play with in the infrastructure space with it, because that's where the opportunity is. And we build whole products that are crypto agile that happen to use it. So look at it like we do plumbing. We do network infrastructure, and we have 100% throughput no observable latency implementations that utilize this cryptography. That's important because I said it's more complex, so it's bigger key size. Bigger key size is slower getting it out the gate. And we offset that by leveraging some technology called vector packet processing developed by Cisco. We're in super deep tech, and it's kind of funny. Like, I didn't personally didn't start out like this. I just sort of backed into this by accident, and you learn a lot by doing, and it's extremely fun stuff.
Yeah, it sounds like the metaphor would be like you're the plumber, but you're not the guys that build the pipes.
That's
You're not
right.
like casting the okay.
But
Do you work?
you don't want somebody who doesn't know what they're doing installing your plumbing on your house, or you're going to lose all of your investment. That's right.
Do you guys work with the people that are building the?
We have we do engage. There was, sometimes it's just high touch, sometimes it's like, arguments. It depends, but there is a central place to engage these cryptographers. Generally we're pretty quiet on the forum. We did raise an issue on an issue was brought up with one of the ciphers, which was called Kyber, and it had a technical issue on the masking. So we had worked up a solution and emailed them, and this kind of stuff. But look, this is not the place for generalist, right? So the worst thing a person could do is be a generalist and maybe be a genius even from the age of 7 in coding or something. But unless that they exclusively focused on this for 10 years, I would say caution. If I were starting a company and I had a genius, and the genius was, 4 years at Microsoft, 3 years at Verizon, and 2 years here and 10 years at the Linux Foundation, that's not enough for me. Like, I actually have to see papers that they published, and they have to be consistent, and there have to be no glaring errors. And if there's a glaring error, everyone will see it. So it's really dangerous space for generalists.
How do you locate someone that's a specialist in that space?
Yeah, that's a process. So for me, I got very lucky, and it's also something you maybe have 80% solution for in the beginning. Maybe you are that generalist, and you spend the next 5 years becoming an expert. And that's sort of what happened with my co-founder. So he's regarded by several units around several places around the federal government as like an expert we want to call.
I'm like, and I wonder what your thoughts are on like the future of the like, do you think that the daddy kind of said no earlier, I think, when I asked if all the emails were going to get hacked open, but like, do you like, some people say we're in the apocalypse right now. Like that's the great eye opening, all the great revealment basically. And is this like, I don't know if you
I
believe
don't
in
know what
fate.
kind of world people want to live in if this is ideological. I have no quarrels sharing mine. I absolutely do not want to live in a transparent world. And I think that individual transparency is horrible. I think it goes against individualism, and it goes against what individuals strive for in collectivist societies. Trust me, I lived it 10 years. I speak Korean. I have an accent. I used to have an accent over my English. And there's a lot of lack of experienced people who read a lot of books leaning in on a conversation. They have no idea what they're talking about.
Yeah, I think it's kind of idealistic or kind of dreamy to say like, yeah, everyone should know everything. Just dump all the data. But like in realistic terms, I have walls around me right now with my 2 doors closed, my windows shut, and blinds closed. I have privacy. People cannot see me working right now. For whatever reason, I wanted to be in private for this conversation. And this is just the tip of the spear, the tip of the iceberg. Like,
Well, let's say, for example, you're a woman and you're in an abusive relationship. If you're transparent, you're never getting out of it. You have to be cunning, right? So this is just nonsense thinking.
in that, can you explain exactly
Or
what you mean?
you have to be very quiet and cunning and plan your escape, and maybe they would murder you if they saw you trying to leave. So you quietly have to reach out to FBI. You quietly have to communicate with your girlfriends or your parents. You quietly have to plan the day you're moving out. You have to be extremely deceptive just to live. And this is a normal thing for most people. If you live in Iraq and you are a Shia in a Sunni area and you fall in love with a Sunni, you'd better be transparent about absolutely nothing, not even that you're in love with someone. You have to lie. Lying is an important part of human survival. A person who thinks that no human should lie is a person who hasn't lived a dangerous day in their life and just should stay out of the conversation.
I agree with you, man. And also, not saying the truth isn't necessarily lying. Like, being silent can be a form of honesty. You don't have to say everything you're thinking and everything you know.
In authoritarian societies, which is about 70% of them in the world, right? At least, well, and I'm making a correlation on that. So let me start up where that assumption comes from. About 70 for 80% of the world live under digital tyranny, like pretty strong. Not like the Facebook and Google stuff annoying me with censoring words. It's much worse than that. You go to prison camps in some of these places, you know, and they live under just straight up coercion. There was a 17-year-old sued by the Prime Minister of Singapore for something he said about him that he thought wasn't genuine. Can you imagine that here, the level of pettiness that some of them do? This is just total tyranny and threat. And rather than rising to the occasion with better ideas, the default of the authoritarian mind is to go and stop it. Well, if your ideas are so great, then you should offer better ones that make people not want to read that stuff. And if you can't win on the power of want at all, then maybe you just, maybe you don't deserve the audience. And I think that's sort of the spirit of our country, and it should stay that way. You have to get in the fight and offer better things to those people who you disagree with. And if you can't do that, then maybe you shouldn't have those things then.
That's very true. But okay, so idealistically, I think we're in a similar vein. I mean, I'm the full transparency is insane, but like realistically, do you think that technically it's going to happen? Maybe not full transparency, but like between, if we're at like 5 to 8% now, that it will be
Yeah,
somewhere like at 80%.
well, obviously we're walking that way. So let's look at it from a statistical perspective. We lose a lot of privacy rights every year. Technology advances every year, and it's not just exponential. I've even saw Google talk about being double exponential. Things move very fast. And I think the technology is outpacing our ability to develop security for it. And we're sort of losing that race, right? Cybersecurity has continuous breaches. Getting out ahead of this is very difficult. And the idea that our harvested data, let me explain. So if you use VPNs, there's a lot of misunderstandings about VPNs. They are not necessarily private. They are meant for a few things, and only 2 or 3 useful things. So let's say you and I live in an authoritarian country and they block access to Disney Plus or Amazon Prime. Well, use a VPN for that. And you need to use a VPN that doesn't use the IP addresses from the Amazon or Azure servers they use, or if they use data centers, they're going to need to bring their IP addresses that change a lot. You want the IP address to look like it's coming from a home device, not a server center, because they block the ones that are coming from server centers. We used to run a VPN. I know a lot about this, and we had users in places like China. And we were able to keep the video streaming and have the video streamer not block the user despite it running a VPN. That's a good use case for a VPN. Whether or not that's ethical, I'll leave that to other people to debate. It's not my responsibility at this time. And then secondly, on that topic, when you, let's say, connect to a UK server, let's say you're a business person from British Petroleum and you're located in Hong Kong and you're working with some partners there on something, I don't know, and you want to watch a British football game, soccer, a football game from there, you probably should be using a VPN to be able to access it. They'll block you in Asia. So while that CEO is there for BP, that's what they use. These are real honest use cases for it. And then maybe you want to double it. You want to basically double wrap encrypt, so Gmail is encrypted. You want to encrypt again over the VPN sending something. Now, here's the thing about VPNs people don't understand. When you do that, when you use a VPN in a network in a country that's dangerous, you're telling them you're using a VPN. The network operator sees it. If you use Tor, now you really told them that you're someone interesting. And if you use Tor, a VPN, and a bunch of other crap, you're a person of interest. And you should be, right? Or you're paranoid and you should see a counselor. I found a lot of people who are uninteresting people and unimportant people sometimes in security think that they go overboard. And when they go overboard, they kind of have the opposite effect. Like, what is it that person is doing, right? And so you need to be kind of careful about that. You can do all the security things, but maybe not tell everyone. And then most importantly, maybe not try to look like it on your digital signature over the internet, right? And that's sort of the thing about VPNs. A lot of VPNs are honey traps for foreign governments. A lot of VPNs are very dishonest. UFO VPN was out of Hong Kong, and they said we don't keep user records, and they keep user records. Well, it's a Chinese company, so what are you going to do about it? you know,
Are oh yeah, are there VPNs that are legit that like actually they don't know you're using a VPN when you're on it?
no, but no, the network operator will always see that you're using a VPN. And then secondly, it's just a question of what other things are you doing to maybe look like, let's say you and I are in the UAE and we're using a VPN to watch Amazon Prime. But then we download Tor and then we're visiting a bunch of Israeli websites and stuff. Now they're going to see that, right? So the more you do, the more interesting you become.
If we're on a mesh network, just my phone to your phone, and I'm using a VPN, is that even possible? Firstly, and secondly, could you find out that I was on a VPN that way without a network processor?
I want to, let's curb this conversation for a more technical one later, because I would need to really think about that. And I would want to know what mesh network, and I would want to talk to people who are more technically depth than I am in that area. But the point is that, VPNs are not always secure, and they're not always the best way to go about security. They have some use cases, but they don't make you necessarily safe. They also collect all of the things you're doing while in that VPN through one central server, everything, right? It's going through one server. And if that was a Chinese government owned VPN, they might collect it all, everything.
Dude, I like that like sometimes the best form of security is no security, because as soon as you have a bulletproof vest on, everyone's like, why is that guy wearing a bulletproof vest? Who is that guy? Everyone
Yes,
keep an
that's
eye on
right.
that guy.
That's 100% right. It doesn't mean you can't do things that are secure and smart. You can't use, AES encryption or something like that. But maybe don't paint all kinds of signs around your house that say, trespassers will be shot in the middle of New York City.
When you like, yeah, when you like you personally are going encrypted or whatever the term would be, not under the radar or whatever, and maybe it's not even worth saying out loud what you do, because as soon as you tell the world this is how the best way to do it, then the
Well,
world
look,
knows.
these are best practices for anyone, right? So, I think that a lot of people have excessive anxiety over stuff. There are things to be anxious over, and then there are things that just create people undue stress. And that's sort of my point about this. And I want to protect ordinary people, and also you have to understand that I lived overseas a very long time, and so you know I'm empathetic to people who are in that world, minorities, people who are murdered for being different, and they read the internet for guidance. Well, if I'm gay and I live in Iran, what do I do? There's a lot of bad advice out there, right? So that's sort of where I'm coming from that perspective. In terms of people who have criminal intent, um, those are a lot easier to deal with than protecting people who are in bad spots and honest. Because, you can dedicate resources to a criminal. We can't dedicate resource to one gay individual in Iran.
So you err on the side of like
I
of telling
think that,
people
go ahead.
how to protect themselves, even if it helps the criminal. And sometimes crime is the good like there's lawful evil. There's people that use the law for evil. There's people that have to break those evil laws, and they're considered criminals. Like George Washington was a criminal at the
Yeah,
time.
I'm not going to ponder on the philosophy of
Yeah.
splitting that hair.
But let's say
Yeah.
violent, evil criminals, for the sake of the argument,
Well,
are
look, there are a lot of things that they can do and they cannot do, and which I have no control over. So, sure, I would like to live in a world without heinous criminals and people who want to bring harm to me and people who are minding their own business, doing nothing wrong. And so I sort of err on that side. But, it is a little bit of a difficult thing when you're giving advice to someone who lives in an authoritarian country, and then I'm giving advice to a general audience. I absolutely do not want to help people who want to hurt other people. And let me be clear about that, right?
that's what I'm talking about. Like Blackstone's formula, Ben Franklin said it's better that 100 guilty people escape than one innocent person suffer, something like that. So along this allegory, like if you have one innocent person that's suffering in Iran or wherever that's under authoritarian regime, and then an evil person that wants to destroy, and they both need the same information. Do you think it's ethical to release that information to help the innocent person, knowing that it could potentially help the violent criminal?
I'll make a deal with you. Well, and when I'm in that position, you'll learn what my opinion was. But I think you know, and it's the kind of one where you maybe want to be careful about telegraphing. People these days are extremely opinionated. Unfortunately, I prefer to engage people who say I'm learning, which is a very different attitude, other than I have the answers to the world. The world's a very complicated place. I'm not a big fan of I have the answer kind of thing standing on there. It doesn't mean that when it's our time to swing, we just swing and see where the chips fall. We absolutely have to swing, right? We have to make decisions. We can't be paralyzed. But I don't like the confidence of the decision. I think that people who make big decisions like that, who have 100 lives on the line, I think they live a life of agony as a result of these decisions, but they know they have to be made. I don't think they're easy. And I think that'll be trivialized, a lot of them on Facebook and social media and Reddit, people arguing this stuff. Like, oh, what would I do in there? I promise you the people who make those decisions live with that the rest of their life, and they know that there are no good choices. And nobody wants that responsibility. And I would be really scared of the person who says, I want that responsibility, give it to me. And I see that from all political spectrums. Oh, if I were in charge, well, then you're definitely the one I don't want in charge just because of the way you talk. Does that make sense?
Oh, 100%, man. I'm very much into the art of war. You feign weakness when you're strong and strength when you're weak. Essentially, like, don't tell the world what you would really do. I mean, there's ethics, and you can say, like, ethically this should happen, but that doesn't mean that you're going to do it when the time comes.
I mean, we all are people. Whether you are just a person whose social network is 25 people, you're eventually going to have to make a decision in life that doesn't have good answers. Whether it is what to do with a 15-year-old daughter that's pregnant, or whether you have a conflict with your son and a bully and the father is the wrestling coach. We have to always make difficult decisions in our life, whether they're small or big. And I personally like to go about grace on evaluating people on that. And, I wish that everyone the best.
So, like, with I want to kind of tie it in with encryption in the sense that, like, it is like, is the future of encryption, are you working to prevent the world's data from being released? Is that like part of your ethos?
That's 100% right. So, and you can Google it, and your viewers can read it. So go to Google and search NIST as one word. It's stands for National Institute Standards and Technology, NIST, and then post-quantum challenge. And there are post-quantum encryption software solutions. And those software solutions have reference implementations on the internet, and we focus on getting them to work well. And the idea is that those who are not transitioned and continue to use it in a quantum era are going to have everything dumped on the internet.
I'm going to pull this up for the sake of this is at csrc.nist.gov. Post quantum cryptography. This is, I mean, anyone that wants to read this can pause the video or go back and reread just the data. So this is a conversation where, like, if I turn away to pull something up, I miss like 6 seconds of what you're saying, and I'm completely lost. Or at least I was while I was pulling this up. You said that there are people that are gonna. Can you repeat the last thing you said about this thing?
Yes. So we run the risk of, if we're not using products that have transitioned over the next 5 years, of that data being dumped on the internet, so historical stored.
What programs are there, any in particular? I mean, is it ethical to even put programs on blast that aren't transitioning? Are there some that people should be concerned of that they should stop using? I mean, I don't want to destroy people's stock value or anything, but from your personal concern, do you see any that's like, whoa, that one isn't up to standard?
Yeah, none of it is up to standard. There is a lot of research underway, even at Wells Fargo and JP Morgan, companies I'd love to talk to. I think that a lot of them get the wrong information. This is one of these things where, I'll make a comparison here. when Shelby was started, the automotive company, they built the Ford GT or the GT40, right? And the GT40 won Le Mans. And the difference between Ferrari, Lamborghini, and other cars were really tiny things. The kind of thing that you and I looking at the car would not be able to tell. Now, Lamborghini and Ferrari could have went and sold JP Morgan or Wells Fargo that their car was going to win. Only an expert would know other car maybe had a better shot and a better driver. Those details for the average person are almost impossible to distinguish. And I really would love the opportunity to talk to those larger companies, because I believe that we have the Ford GT and they have been sold the second and third place car.
What is it that they're using that's second or third place?
Well, there's going to be discussions with them about how to post-quantum encrypt their networks and stuff like that. It's a part of a transition, how you post-quantum encrypt ACH networks and other people in finance. And what we have that's a little bit different is we're able to achieve that at what they call line speed, meaning there is no loss in performance. So it's just like business as usual, despite using post-quantum encryption.
How is it with no lag?
Yeah, that's a lot of high performance networking skill. And that, the number of engineers in the United States who have hands-on experience with that are countable in a conference.
So it's all software?
Yes.
Wow. And then I imagine it's not that there's zero delay or latency or lag or whatever. What was the word you used? Zero
Like low latency is
latency.
yeah. So I mean, I don't mind. It's on our website. So you're basically going to process them up in parallel in a vector rather than in time order, all of them in one stream. And so that allows you to get a lot of speed up. And there's a lot of different technical approaches. We recently had a call with Linux Ubuntu and one of their CTOs. We definitely my colleague, I like bragging about my employees and my co-founders. They definitely know their stuff. And you sort of say that almost from a place of insecurity because you backed into the expertise you have. It's like imposter syndrome. And so sometimes you have to verbalize and remind yourself that you deserve to be here.
Yeah, I'm with that with mines too. I came on as like a designer and everyone's like, Ian knows how to code. And I'll be like, no. I don't know jack shit. Like, I'm not a behind the scenes architect in any way. I can look at a picture on a screen and be like, that button goes there, put that button there and have it linked to a page that does this. But I don't, that's not the extent.
I have something cool I want to share with you. I get sometimes cool gifts, and I'm an Army veteran. And one of my friends, she sent this to me. She was a chief engineer at MITRE, a major American defense related company, and it has the name of our company in mind on an ammo can.
Oh, that's awesome.
And
dude, Tim has one of those too. I love it. He has a Timcast one.
Yeah, I got that. I'll tell you who I got that from. Well, maybe I didn't ask them permission, but I can share. I got that from someone who works at Foundation for Defensive Democracies, and they are backed by Dick Cheney and John McCain people. And one of the women there who I adore mailed that to me, and was like, "You're working really hard." And I thought about you guys, and I sent this to you. And I was like, "That's one of the nicest gifts I've gotten."
Do you have a love for like the military industrial complex?
No, I actually do not. It's a very low trust environment. It's very difficult to navigate. There are heroes in there. There are wonderful people. I prefer a high trust environment, and I prefer to focus on the future, not the next contract. But that's what it is. That's the system. What I love is a little bit different, and I can share this with you. You know, when the Boston Tea Party sort of vibe, right? I'll put it in today's language. And it was like, don't tell me what to do, and don't take advantage of me, don't tread on me, and don't abuse me for your greater good. And it was a revolt, right? America is a revolution. It's a constant state of revolution, and it should never rest from revolution. America is a living revolution. Whether it is women taking off their tops in the 70s, to whether we like it or not, the protests in 2020, whether we like this stuff or not, the identity of America is we are a living revolution, and we're never going to rest. I'm very cautious about people who want us to mature and stop, because the rest of the world looks to us as that example. And maybe not all of them. Maybe, let's look at countries that have populations of 50 or 300 million people. Maybe our audience, like you had alluded to earlier, is just the 500,000, right? Who just gets treaded on, stepped on. And they look to us for hope. And that is not ending. There is, I think, a lot of misinformation on the United States about the existence of that somehow the United States is the bad guy treading on them. I assure you, they haven't lived overseas for a very long time to know that
That's
it's just not true. And the problem is in those places, if you speak up, you go to a gulag or something, you disappear in the middle of the night. That happens still in a lot of the world. You're just gone.
it must have been transformative. I mean, to back up what you're saying, the U.S. Constitution is written so that it's in constant revolution. Like we're revolving laws, we're constantly changing itself so that we don't have to come to arms to do it. Technically, we're supposed to
But
do it through
it
diplomacy.
can be. Look, it doesn't have to be about arms revolution. Are it's also a state of mind. It's a state of no rest. It's a state of constant growth and constant change. Nobody gets to put it on coast and not worry anymore. We're not getting that luxury. It's never going to come. And I
Did
think
you?
that we should abandon that desire of just being able one day to no longer have a fight. No, don't do
Yeah,
that.
that's like the debate between like conservatism, which is like I want to preserve the Constitution, whereas other people are like, no, we need to revolve the Constitution. And you're like, well, we need to do both. But like,
It
well,
also sharpens the mind to have a fight to go to. And it pushes us to ask ourselves a lot more harder questions about what we believe. And that exercises the mind. The mind has to constantly be forced to exercise, or we will become slow and dumb.
I've been trying to think about a Bill of Rights for the internet, and it's like that's the sharpening. My mind is dull in that sense. I should be able to sharply define exactly what we need, put it down on paper. There's the Manila Principles, which are like 6 basic principles.
I think there are two turns people in the United States can make that will solve a lot of problems for us. Number one is to get in the habit of, rather than shutting down other people and trying to make them not have a voice, which both sides do, try to develop more attractive ideas, more attractive speech, more attractive wants. Play to the power of want with people, not with the power of fear. And then we will see a lot of progress really fast. But it starts with education system, teaching people how to competently express themselves, and if not, working groups with one who can. And then in private, if you're not a speaker, work with people who can. America has to revive the art of the debate starting from young. I don't have a problem with all kinds of political views being argued. What is a challenge, though, is when they're poorly articulated and people go to default things like violence or to censorship just because they're ill-equipped and unable to persuade people to want to be accepting their views because of the attractiveness of them. And that is a skill that's lacking.
Yeah, also physical health. People are way more willing to listen to and believe someone if they're healthy. And like obesity and eating azo dyes and preservatives, it just makes people like subconsciously, I think, like less attractive, and therefore their ideas are less attractive, literally vibrationally less attractive to the amygdala.
Well, I think also it's, a lot of frustration and anger come from a lack of tools to choose from to get what you want in life, or to express yourself or to be heard. And that's a failure of our education system to equip people with those basic tools. So you're always going to have a couple of million people out of like 25 who have it together, but for the rest of them, they don't. I personally love a good debate. It's not an emotional thing for me. Well, I have a couple of rules. Someone recently approached me about the very contentious the one on Palestine and Israel. And I said, before we engage this discussion, I have a rule. If I, number one, introduce some analytical reasoning that is very convincing and it makes you pause, or number two, I just bulldoze you and win the argument, tomorrow you will change your entire view to be exactly like mine, or at least be reduced in your confidence. And if you can't do one of those, I'm not going to talk with you and this conversation is over. Those are my rules. And I think that that's really helpful because it raises the stakes and it makes the engagement meaningful. and we're not just there to piss in the wind.
Yeah, I've noticed that too, that like sometimes I'll make a really good point with someone, but it takes them 3 days before they start repeating it as if it's their own idea. It's not always immediate. It's definitely not immediate. It's very rarely that someone just turns is like, "Oh yeah, you're right. My worldview is now different." It takes a really
I
strong mind to override the nervous system and do that.
I don't have any intention of them changing their mind tomorrow. It's more sort of bringing to their attention, what are you trying to accomplish here? Are you trying to learn, or are you trying to get a dopamine high of conquering someone? And the later, I don't have time for.
Did you used to be big into debate before you spent time overseas?
You know, yeah, I always enjoyed the dopamine burst. When I was younger, it was more, getting the high, and then you learn that it's sort of petty and a waste of my time to want to win an argument to feel good about myself. And you don't build an audience, you don't build a team if you do that. So when I meet people who like to win arguments and hurt other people's self-esteem, I just see a really kind of a useless person. And I don't have time for that. It's just not just we're just at different levels. It's like a dog talking to a human. It's just it's hard to communicate with them. When people are more genuine and they kind of get past trying to hurt people emotionally, and they're just wanting to learn, then you have the problem of being misunderstood, that you're there to learn, not to win, right? So you kind of can't have both.
It's yeah. Learning is winning, even if you're wrong.
Yeah, that's right. Because you're going to regroup, you're going to rethink, you're going to put things into different boxes, and the truth is forever elusive, always running, always changing, and that's the exciting part.
Did you like when you what like inspired you to go overseas in the first place?
The first time I went overseas, I was in the army. It's kind of a funny story. I didn't want to go. I kicked and screamed, and I volunteered. I was in 101st Airborne Division, and I was in a legal office. I was a paralegal. I was trained by the United States government to be like an administrative clerk, and then a paralegal for the United States JAG Corps Army. And I worked both. I did everything from taxes to preparing paperwork for a prosecution against criminals, all kind of stuff. And I got orders for being deployed to South Korea. This was before the internet, so this was before. This was when I had a beeper. I had a pager. We didn't have mobile.
96, 95, 96. I
It
remember
was
those years.
98. Yeah,
98.
I had a pager,
Nice.
and we used to send text messages by arranging the numbers. with
Oh, that's all. Yeah, dude.
And that's how I lived. And so, if I wanted to know about Korea, I had to go to the library and get a book that was probably published in the 1970s with black and white pictures of Korea. I had no way to see it. So I didn't know whether Korea was like Good Morning Vietnam or what. And here it is. At least they have a sprawling metropolises with cities that are gorgeous. And I didn't know that till I landed there. I tried to get out of it, and I put in a package. I wanted to go to 5th Special Forces Group or to 82nd Airborne, and then into SF Group. I was also air assault qualified. I ran a 2 mile in 12 minutes and 30 seconds, and I was pretty fit, and I was fairly capable person. So, but I got shafted and stuck, and I sent to Korea, and it turned out to be the right choice for me. I loved it. And I got out of the Army in 2005. I skipped a lot of stories in the Army. I just want to be quick about this. And I went back there for 10 years. And I started a quantitative hedge fund manager offshore. And I started a language model related company in sentiment analysis for quantitative finance. And that company was acquired or exited. I got paid lots of money to move back to the United States and work with a hedge fund running their unstructured data driven desk. I built the desk. So using like not price data to trade, like language, Twitter, satellite imagery, and stuff like that.
To trade
Yeah, I'll give
value.
you an example. There's an old trade that doesn't work anymore that people had tried, where you use satellite imagery and you purchase it to count the cars in parking lots at retail outlets before Amazon. And this would give you an estimate of quarterly earnings coming for retail. Because if the car parking lot's empty, they're not selling anything.
That's deep.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. I love that kind of stuff. I like thinking outside the box like that. That's sort of my call to purpose.
Geez, I mean, vague question. Is that how artificial intelligence works? Does it grab all these different
You
aspects?
in that one you use machine learning to basically be able to count the car in the photo. You're going to train what a car shape would look like from that type of picture.
And then when you were there, like in South Korea, is that when like, did it like harden your resolve about the value of speaking good ideas? I don't know much about South Korea. If it's authoritarian, if it's the kind of place where
So
people get,
Korea is a very post military society. So in the 80s, 70s, if you had long hair, police would hold the man down and just shave the head off. You were not allowed to leave the country without special permission. And still today, it's very difficult if you're a woman and you're 45 and you, for example, for visa reasons, want to travel to the US and you have no ties here and you're not married, getting a visa was near impossible 15 years ago for them. In Koreans, when they return to Korea, if they do, let's say, marijuana in the United States, they get prosecuted in Korea for it, despite it being legal in the United States. It's a very different civilization beyond the imagination of most American citizens, no matter their background or experience.
uh, that's wild. So then did you come back from Korea and with like a new perception on
Yeah, of
like,
course. What we're doing is extremely important. And unfortunately, I think a lot of people who lack that world experience just shit on this place and they want to burn it down. And, and even if they don't say that, their actions are that way. And here's my view on that. And it's I think a very important view. Those people are extremely smart overseas and they're very well read and they're not stupid at all. And some of them, on average IQs, US is not in the top 3 by country. And they're unable to, in many cases, replicate some parts of what we have. There's a long, long path for them. Some of them will never get it. So then the freedoms that we have, which I think are worth all the pain and all the cost, because you don't know what it's like till you live without it. And those things we have are as rare as life itself. And it may never be replicated again.
I noticed that living in South America, and I'm glad I did, in Chile, when they were like, it's the federales on every corner. There's only federal police all through the country. There's no local cops. So if the guy at the top is like, I want that guy arrested, the entire country's police force is out to find that guy. Like, there's no state that can be like, get out of my state. You have no authority here. Get out of this is my jurisdiction. I was like, wow, localized governance is like, such a beautiful, like these United States are like such a powerful function to have local systems,
Yeah,
whether you agree with them or not.
that's right. The inefficiencies are absolutely worth it. And so we don't want to move too fast. And that's 100% right. And we don't want too competent of government, because then all the bad things will happen. It's supposed to be like this. It was designed like this. And there will be trade-offs, but they're worth it.
What do you think are like the biggest fears or like your biggest concerns in the next 10 years for, I guess, for the well-being of the species?
Well, our biggest one, I think we're all united on, and is that we have resource scarcity. And there is a particular challenge of, let me share a couple of things. The kind of inflation that we're seeing is largely coming from increasing demand and reduced supply, right? So this pushes price ups, right? This is economics undergrad level. And the more the world develops economically with constrained production of resource or access to resource or lifting cost of resource, right? Prices move up. And so do, if you look at oil, I was an oil analyst. And if you look at oil, all the new wells are not on land except for shale. They are offshore. Offshore rigs are as technically complex as putting a rocket in space. That should tell you that we are in a resource scarce environment if we're having to invest that kind of engineering for it. And there is sort of a consensus that at the minimum, providing humanity with a stable supply of natural resources is requiring our full effort of technical ability. It was not always like that. And so the biggest risk we have is resource scarcity increasing because every month, hundreds of thousands or millions of new people join the workforce. Software engineers are going to face more and more competition from around the world as people get a computer. Say, I want to be rich like Americans, and I'm going to do what it takes. So when you have a billion more people in the workforce, but the supply of natural resources to power them, to reward them for it, do not increase, you have a problem.
That when they talk about, I watched these debates last night, these Republican debates, and they're like, whenever the economy comes up, and it's hopefully not every time, they resort to cut spending, increase product. No, they don't even mention productivity, which is what I want them. I want them to talk about increased GDP, gross domestic. What are we producing? What resources are we producing? Talk about hydrogen fuel.
So
like,
I think that one cool thing I learned, I'm very much, I want to make comment, you brought it up for me, and this is important. And I will make a critique of me being born bred this culture, this civilization, socialized this way, and not going to change. I'm going to die in the United States, and I've lived overseas a long time. They're really exciting places, but if you want to live somewhere where you don't require additional effort to be understood, then you want to be home. And I don't want to put that effort in. I'm lazy, and I like being home. And I did my tour. 3 tours, 2, 3, 4, 5, I don't know, a lot. And Americans are really good at adapting good ideas from other places, but we're not real good about talking about it. It's like you're not patriotic if you say there's something to learn from another country. But we do it. But it just shows weakness and insecurity. And it's not the attitude of a confident person. And Americans are unnecessarily insecure about themselves, and it's part of what keeps them humble. I think Americans are unfairly born with way too much responsibility and power. Whether they realize it or not, that passport is muscle. And I can talk about that on a whole nother podcast. Be in another country and have a company giving you a hard time with your passport and your company, visit the United States Embassy. Visit the FBI attaché, and you're going to learn what that passport, that bad boy does. And on that particular topic of this one, I think there are some things the United States can learn from other places and openly discuss it, or at least in private rooms. And what I learned in Korea and a lot of that school of economics, I studied graduate school there, was rather than talk about quarterly earns, they talk about market share. So it's zero sum. And the second thing they talk about is, GDP growth, like a benchmark, like a target, right? Like a target. And I think that for the United States to be outcompeting its threats as it's on its heels, we should have targets for GDP, at least in our minds emotionally. We want to double the GDP to 28 trillion or to 50 trillion. People can say that that's an imperfect measure, fine, then go find a better one. But still, the underlying intention has to be there. It's not enough to just improve our quality of life. We have to sustain enough power to be that beacon for the rest of the world. In my opinion and my values, which a lot of people, I understand, do not agree with, which is perfectly fine.
Well, we definitely need to increase our production capacity and output. But I would even go so far as to say, in 9 years, we're going to have plus 60% GDP, but in 1 year, we'll have a negative 8% GDP. Like, we can accept some loss in the short term if we have a target of a goal of a gain in the long term. And that's also humiliating to say, it's not going to be so good next year or the year after that, because we're going to invest everything we got into this one process, or hydrogen production, graphene production, whatever. And it's going to cost us massive amounts of our wealth but I don't know.
One thing about I love economics, and by economics, I mean, it's sort of baked into how I even value my time and my life. And I think that one thing many people that I meet, I think their lives would go a lot better if they thought of the cost of their time relative to dying. So let's just delete the idea of afterlife for a minute and talk about what we optimize while we're alive. If I enter into a business deal for 6 months and then they cancel the deal at the end because they decide it's not what they want. It absolutely is personal, because they took during that 6 months is time away from my loved ones and the things that I also wanted, that I do work so that I can have time to do. You just took that from me. And so it's deeply fucking personal. And I think that when people say value your time, that's what it means. So just delete the idea of an afterlife for a minute and say, how do you feel about that person taking 4 hours of your day for 6 months and leaving you with nothing? And I think that we have to start thinking like that. And this will sharpen everybody's tools and make everyone a more cooperative person, because we value each other's time like that.
And
We
speaking
don't
of
get to do this again.
what's that?
We don't get to do this again.
That's what I'm talking about. And talking about valuing people's time, it's 2:05, and we had a plan to go 1 hour, and we have gone 1 hour. I know you got you're a busy man. You got a lot going on. So I wanted to wind it down and wrap it up. But did you have any other ideas that you wanted to bring up that didn't get brought up?
I can always make time to be a part of everyone learning something. So that, in a selfish Ayn Rand way, makes my life better if other people are sorted. And so I always can make time to invest in myself by giving knowledge to other people who make my life less difficult, because they are a little bit more thoughtful. So I will be talking to you anytime you ask me to.
Yeah, man, let's do it again with and maybe higher tech. We can bring some technicians in and go even deeper into like the math and the numbers and stuff too. That'd be
I
fun.
have to bring in my colleague for that, so which would be great. I would tap out and say it's beyond my expertise at that
And
point.
perhaps this guy who gave us a great super chat at the beginning, Philip Fisher, could join. He's one of my business partners. He's a fantastic back-end developer. Oh, you can do front end and back end. The guy's amazing. Thanks, Philip. Yeah, that'd be really cool, man. So everyone else, thanks for coming, and subscribe to the channel, like the video, share it with your friends too. So send it around. Send any of these videos around if you like them. It's really, really awesome for not only the algorithm, but the show in general and life as we propagate. Kevin.
And serendipitously, we have the same color orb.
Oh, yeah. Is that what that is? What is that thing?
It's a moon. I just chose change of color. It looks better in the dark.
That's nice looking.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got this light. It makes my face red having that purple behind me, but I think it's worth it. It's so red. Oh, I forgot to open my blinds. Maybe that's why it's so red today.
Okay.
Into it. Whatever. All right, man. Have a
Take
great
care.
day, dude. See you later. Bye, everyone.